Welcome to Soul Connections with your host, Elena Angel.
Hello, this is Elena Angel and Soul Connections. Soul Connections is a space for soulful conversations and explorations in consciousness. I'm very excited to connect with you in this way and to share and explore together. After many years of soul searching and several major life and career transitions, I've come to recognize some themes that I feel are very relevant to all of us who are called to a more soul-driven existence. This is what Soul Connections is about. There's a great awakening at this time, and this means we're all facing crises, turning points, transformations, big changes, big endings, big beginnings. And it helps enormously to get really clear on what drives us, the desires of the soul. So what are they? The first thing that I've always sought to find, and probably you too, is my soul purpose. The second thing, my soulmates, my soul family. So let's explore these two. I believe that in order for us to be really happy, we need these two elements in place. We need a deep sense of meaning, a sense of purpose and mission. This way you know what you're here for. You're aware of your significance in this life and in the grand scheme of things. When you know this, you have a fundamental trust. A trust in yourself, in your choices. You have confidence in your direction in life, and you enjoy a certain dignity, a self-esteem. The second element is love. We have a great need for love and connection. This is a sense of belonging, of coming home. Deep down, we're seeking a level of connection that is so profound, so true, so intimate and unconditional that we feel totally seen and accepted. And nothing makes us feel happier and more alive than when we share this love, when we embrace and are embraced in a soulful way. Usually we start to seek this love and recognition outside of ourselves until we realize that the place to look is within. But once you find this love within, you discover a quality of being that you can experience in everything that you do. This is the love of life itself. I believe it's possible for you to enjoy a quality of deep connection and recognition in every space that you find yourself. At home, at work, with your beloved, with your family, your friends, your community, with nature, with the planet. When the two elements are combined, when you're living your soul purpose and connecting deeply with others, your experience of life as a co-creation is on a whole new level. This has been my experience. I believe this is part of our individual and our collective journeys of evolution. So this show, Soul Connections, looks at how our life and relationships are transformed when we heed our soul's call for that deeper meaning and when we find those deeper connections and love. In the coming episodes, I'll share more about my own journey, as well as resources and practices that I have found useful on this path, both working on myself, also with my coaching clients. I'm also joined by special guests, people who are not only experts in their fields, but also very much on this same path of soulful evolution. You'll hear some fascinating stories and find plenty of information and inspiration, resources and ways that you can connect with the deepest part of you and live your best life. Tune in for special prize draws and win gifts from myself and featured guests, in addition to all the free takeaways that are detailed in each episode. There's much more, but I'll leave that a surprise for now. It's time to introduce my very first guest. Isaac George. Isaac is a spiritual mentor and evolutionary astrologer. He's in fact someone who is gifted in many different ways, including as an angelic channel. Isaac George is an author, a musician, and composer. He is known for his work in sacred sexuality and as a facilitator mainly in North America, Hawaii, and in the UK. I came across Isaac George and his work for the very first time several years ago, but in a more recent conversation, I was very interested to discuss topics like karma, soul purpose, and destiny. I wanted to get his perspective, both in terms of his own journey and also through the lens of evolutionary astrology, which is one of Isaac's specialisms. Our conversation went on for about an hour. Honestly, it could have gone on much longer. It was just so fascinating to listen to what Isaac had to share. And so today I'll be sharing with you the first half. I'd invite you to tune in again next week for the second half of the conversation. So let's get straight into it. My first question was about Isaac's early career in the corporate world. I wanted to know why he left that behind and transitioned to a very different way of life where soul comes first. What caused that very first shift?
It was caused by a spontaneous Kundalini awakening.
Okay.
And in the Sanskrit or Hindu traditions, that is akin to basically going through a process in which the Shakti energy at the base of the spine, this is in Ayurvedic science, is stimulated in some way that causes it to begin to rise through the spinal channel and trigger off in all the chakras and finally exiting on the crown chakra at the top of the head. And I did know about the chakrotic system before this, but what started to happen for me, I had no idea what it was. I mean, I was completely lost because I'd never even heard the word Kundalini at the time.
So what brought it about? What happened?
A combination of factors. And, you know, it's not the first time I've had an awakening process. I mean, I had an amazing encounter at 7 years of age that so traumatized me that it caused PTSD and I suppressed it. And then I went through other experiences in my late teens and early 20s. And then, you know, about age 25 or so, I just kind of like retreated into the business world.
Right.
And then had like little things happen, not as profound as this particular experience. But what triggered that was a combination of factors that I came to understand later on. Was initially a major heart opening. I encountered another person who really helped to trigger it off just because of the energetic constellation between the two of us.
This is fascinating.
And, you know, she was married, I was married, we didn't want an affair, but something happens that only the heart knows. And you cannot resist it, explain it. I think a character in one of the Coen brothers films, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, said, you know, it is a fool who looks for logic in the chambers of the human heart. And it began a process that I actually found out later on was astrologically influenced. It was sort of time for something major to shift in my life, and something I had been resisting all of my life literally just dropped in and blew the doors off of my previous life up to that point.
Amazing. So up to that point, you weren't especially interested in astrology or...
I dabbled with it,
Okay.
and it was cute, and it was interesting, and I had some readings back in my 20s, but they didn't make much sense to me.
I see. So was that one of the reasons or the main reason why you started looking into it?
No, the first thing I actually started investigating was people who had other awakening experiences like this, historically and contemporarily as well. Tried to find out what was happening in my process, but immediately the first thing that happened was kind of an awakening of an inner voice that felt like a guide to me, and then I kind of called it my guardian angel. And so really it was very much more celestial, metaphysical than it was astrological. And that went on for the better part of 2 years, and there were a lot of physiological changes, energy changes, end of a second marriage, end of jobs, moving into other jobs in the music retail industry. And I lost, I'm in the space of 9 months from the beginning of the onset of this. I lost 42 pounds, gave up smoking, gave up alcohol, gave up caffeine, started meditating twice a day, was basically celibate for almost 2 years. So in that space of time, astrology was the first thing from my mind. I was not even focused there. And then I decided to get a transit reading, which is basically a reading that looks at the current time, what's going on with you in relationship to your birth chart, with a woman in Oregon who was amazingly intuitive as well as an incredible astrologer. And she just opened a whole new window of understanding for me through that one reading.
So you were really following this inner voice, or this guidance that you felt inside.
Yeah.
This is so interesting. I'm sure many of our listeners are going to resonate, because there is an awakening happening on the planet. I mean, it has been going on for some time, and perhaps it's intensifying now. And how do you see things, I mean, compared to when you had your big awakening experience to what you're seeing now? And do you think there's a difference, or would you have benefited from some extra guidance, do you think? Or would it be different for you if you had this experience now?
Yeah, I would think it'd be a lot different if I had it now. I think the things that I touched on in that awakening experience are timeless, but I think having it now, where I am chronologically, age-wise, and if I had continued living in the corporate life or business world all this time, I think it would have been a heck of a lot more challenging, because I would have had more baggage to unload. I would have had more of an investment in my lifestyle or my attachments. At that time, I was questioning things anyway. The year before, in '93, I was questioning my marriage that I was in. My mother had passed away a year and a half earlier, and I was, parentless. And so there were a lot of things up for me that I was questioning, and feeling like I'm not living what I should be doing, and I'm not who I should be being. And so that set the stage of me sort of just praying to the universe in a random sort of way, and then lightning struck in the early part of January 1994, and it just went on from there. But tapping into today, what I see happening in the world today is sort of the chaos I went through for 6 years. That spiritual awakenings are not necessarily gentle and full of flowers and rainbows. They can be incredibly destructive in terms of how we perceived the world, how we perceive ourselves in it, and all our beliefs and attachments that get sort of trashed along the way in that awakening process.
Yes, absolutely. It is a bit of a shock to the system. But at the same time, I hear you saying there is a divine timing to this, and I think also that's what you discovered through looking at the transit.
The astrological
transit.
markers, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little more about this. We had a conversation a little while ago, and I was fascinated to hear you speak of the North Node and the South Node. What would help our listeners to understand a bit more about it for themselves?
I'm going to preface my view or my understanding of the Nodal System with the idea that astrology is a language for interpreting what we're experiencing in this time-space continuum on this planet. It is not the full truth, but it is a convenient vehicle for trying to understand the processes, and also what I call the loopiness of history. And in a way, nothing's new is under the sun. It all just keeps coming back in different expressions, different permutations each time. Some people who are students of metaphysics would liken these times to the times of mythical Atlantis, and saying, we're facing the same choices, the same crises, the same decision making. The nodes are abstract points in space for the listener to understand. They're calculated in a person's birth chart. They're also standard issue, if you will, as to in terms of the transits or what's going on in the sky right now. And these calculated points in space represent subtle states of the unconscious or subconscious. and they don't relate to planets or stars or anything like that. What they represent in this purest sense is the North Node in Vedic astrology is the head of the dragon, and that's Hindu astrology, and which is the oldest system of astrology that we know of. And the South Node is the tail of the dragon, or the past. So the North represents the potential futures or potentiality of the individual, or a culture, or a country, or an entire planet. And the South Node is what needs to be resolved in order for that to manifest or come into realization. So the South Node thing is sort of the baggage, the karmic patterns, and my view of karma is different maybe from classical traditions. And also the gifts that we hid from ourselves that actually we need to express in order to become fully who we are, and yet somebody told us, no, you can't do that, or no, that isn't appropriate, and we hid them away.
This is so fascinating, and I can totally resonate with that. That's been pretty much my life story. I think probably everybody's, right?
Probably.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So I'm interested. You said probably your view of karma is different. How do you see it?
Well, maybe the stock view that most Westerners have is I call it the cheap explanation is, oh, if you do something good will happen. If you do something bad will happen. And if you invest in the idea of past lives or parallel lives, if you did somebody dirt 300 years ago somewhere else, then it'll come back. You'll have to rectify that. It'll have to be something you'll experience it. You'll understand what you did and change your behavior or change your attitudes. I think there's on some mundane level that does come into play, but that's not the purpose of karma. I think what purpose of karma is, in the esoteric sense, is that we come to understand where we have buried in our unconscious, or we are not aware of, that is buried in the soul's memory, things that we have made vows or promises to ourselves to not do and to avoid because of some traumatic experience, either that which was caused to us or by us towards another. And so that becomes crystallized in the memory patterns. Now, here's my trick about karma and about what the chart for an individual means, is that at the moment a baby draws its first breath, at the moment of birth, that's when the chart becomes active. It's not active before that. As soon as you are inside the electromagnetic field of this planet as a living, sentient being, your body is immediately imprinted with all the radio frequencies of every planet surrounding this Earth, and the Earth itself, and all the fixed stars. Now, the stars and the planets don't guide our destiny, or they don't create our fate, but they give us a set of parameters in which to understand what are our conditioned patterns that we're holding on to, i.e. karma. What is it that we can find that will help us liberate ourselves from ourselves, i.e. moving toward the North Node of the soul? And then how can we better understand that liberation is a here and now deal, not something in the afterlife or in some future life?
I take it this is more in line with the evolutionary soul-based astrology.
Yes, that's school. Mm-hmm.
School. All right. I'm just curious. I mean, the way you put it, I'm wondering, is there such a thing as free will, or is it all predestined anyway? Is the soul, destined to evolve in the perfection and reach the North Node, or how do you see it?
This is a real touchy one. This is an anecdote. Back during my Kundalini awakening first year or so, I ran across the body of material from a group of individuals, or maybe they weren't real humans, I'm not sure, E.T. Earth Mission. And there was a meditation that they provided that actually questioned the dogma around free will, and basically said, you've never had any free will, and if you look at it from the human's perspective, we want to feel like we're in control of our destiny. We're in charge. We call the shots and make the decisions. And I didn't encounter that concept again until watching the first Matrix film, in which Morpheus challenged Neo. He says, do you believe in destiny? Do you believe in fate? And he says, no, I believe I'm in charge of my, I don't want to believe in that. I'm in charge of my whole life. He says, I thought exactly as you do. Now, here's one way to think about the free will thing. Our egos can respond, react, or resist to any situation that arises in our journey here in understanding what the human experience is. But I think our soul's plan, its agenda, is formulated at some point in time, space before we actually draw that first breath. And I think that which we have determined to be or seen as destiny or fate or predestination is really a pattern of intent. And it doesn't lock us in. But I'll tell you, I've seen it happen with myself and other people over and over again. They keep trying to bang their head against the walls, going in a particular direction, try to make something happen, and they are disappointed every time because their soul is saying, you can say no as many times as you want, but this is not going to happen.
Yes, it's as though the soul has a certain design for the life, right?
The higher self.
A grand design, yes. And within that, there is some freedom, but we do hit some walls as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have the freedom to react, respond emotionally, otherwise, to any situation that arises, and they are learning tools as well, for the soul and for the ego. But if the ego tries to run the whole game, good luck. It's not going to happen. We need this ego. It is not our enemy. I don't feel. I think it's an intrinsic part of us, and the soul has designed it for the purposes of being able to navigate this lifetime in this situation.
So what would the value of a transit reading be for a person? Is it just to reassure them that, hey, you're doing the right thing, or to highlight why they might be having a particular challenge?
Bingo. Number 2. Why is this happening to me? It's Charlie Brown syndrome. Why is this crap always happening to me? That is the main purpose. It's the mirror language that tells the person either I'm right where I'm supposed to be right now, doing the right thing at the right time, or I'm not. I'm resisting something. I'm not looking at something. I'm terrified of moving into that thing that I really desire, or being that thing I really am, because of something holding me back. And how can the transits illuminate that struggle, that anxiety, or that reluctance to actually embrace more of the person's own self? It's really kind of a tool for getting people to love and accept who they are.
Yes, of course. In my work as well, I'm always looking at this dual motivation. We have the negative motivation of trying to overcome the past and process it and move beyond our family histories and so on. At the same time, there is another kind of drive, more of a pull of the soul towards a higher expression of ourselves, or a blossoming.
Yeah.
And that's where living our soul purpose can be an interesting area of self-inquiry, I would say. And a lot of people are interested in that. And a lot of people are asking me, I don't know, can you help me to identify my real soul purpose, the thing that my soul is here for? Is this something that understanding the North Node would help with?
Exactly. The North, sitting down with somebody who understands the importance of the nodes, and I see, the rest of the chart's information is supporting whatever the North Node is about. And also represents or shows with the aspect lines in the center of the chart the various easy flows and potentialities within the individual and where they're warred with themselves, basically blocking energy or preventing something from flowing right. So the North Node gives them the reassurance and also the set of instructions, if you will, the owner's manual of how to move away from the tendencies they've had all their life or in past lives, and be able to move forward into a deeper and fuller and more fulfilling expression of who they are, with a lot less tension in the body, a lot less tension and anxiety in the mind.
And it's quite a journey, isn't it? It's not necessarily a straight line. I'm just thinking of your own journey here. You left the business world, but then you were a channel for a long time. What was that all about?
Well, that came about, I think, as a an offshoot or byproduct of the Kundalini awakening in my meditation, deepening practice of meditation. And, I still have question marks around that whole phase. I think being a channel, some people can lock themselves into that and never move beyond it. Working, mediumistic types of people, working with spirit guides or working with the, people who have passed on to other planes or humans who have died. I never did that. So the channeling was more like being a radio for the voices of higher dimensional beings. And it wasn't a full trance experience. I was always feeling like I was sitting on the sidelines listening along with everybody else. And I heard everything, but I never remembered it once the session was over or once the event was over. If somebody tried to play back the recording of it, I couldn't hear it. I couldn't listen to it. It was definitely me, but not me.
It was a very it was a very interesting experience for me receiving a reading from you back then.
Forgotten all about
yes, I know. But if I remember correctly, this wasn't something that you sought to do. You were kind of recruited almost, right?
Yeah, I was. I was pretty much. Yeah, it was something that felt like it didn't feel like it was ever imposed on me when it first happened. It felt like, okay, I signed up for this in some way. I just don't remember it.
Yeah.
So it never felt imposed, but also I knew it was a limited engagement. I was only going to be on tour for so long, and then basically the feeling around 2007, 8, 9 was a hand in the back going, okay, your turn. Mm. But it's taken me a long time to feel like, okay, now I can get out on the stage in the spotlight. This is about channeling my spirit. It's not about channeling other entities or angelics or whatever.
Because you were channeling the Archangel Ariel.
Right.
Yeah.
And other characters.
And other characters. Yeah. Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah. Some I'd never heard of before until they happened, like Saint Germain, and it was like, who is this guy that sounds so kind of posh? No, that was a surprise to me. And again, sometimes we don't understand the nature of consciousness and how things work from a frequency standpoint and how convoluted it is. So I'm wondering, today, was it because of the partner I had at the time who was so completely taken with the idea of Saint Germain that it's like somehow or another my subconscious manufactured him? I'd never read anything about him. I'd never seen anything about this guy. I'd never even seen those pictures that you see, those Ascended MasterCards. But I wasn't into that. I just wasn't into that. I was just sort of like, there's just me and the goddess. Let's just truck on down the road.
Wow. So I'm just wondering, so you've been a channel, you're an astrologer, you're also a musician and a composer, and here we are wondering about soul purpose and destiny. I mean, how have you reconciled like all these different activities and talents and engagements? How do you see yourself, and how would you guide someone else who maybe has also a multifaceted interest?
It's easier for me to help somebody else. It's really difficult to see myself, and that's why we need the mirrors of other people. Right. I think this is the one thing that I find both amusing and a little bit frustrating or exasperating on social media is about so many individuals desperately trying to claim their identity and being, sort of like, I'm the soul. I don't know, it's not it is somewhat narcissistic, but it's also about just trying to claim all that who you are in the face of everything and thinking, I don't need anybody. It's like, I think that's an incredibly dangerous position because you don't get reflections that you can learn about yourself through. So with the whole channeling thing, for me, it was like being on the sidelines, but don't think for a moment I wasn't getting talked to as well, and having reflected back to me through that process from other people, from Ariel or whoever that was or is, and it's a situation of like, I've got to own who I am, and I've got to also understand I don't see all ends being this human being and understanding what the human animal experience is like. I have a limited set of perceptions. And nothing more profound to me was running across a book called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, and I'd encourage your readers to check it out. You can find used copies very easily. And the idea that, you know, we have a certain set of filters that we operate with here, and so I can't see myself. And how do I reconcile myself with the channeling thing? I still wonder about it. I still wonder about it. But again, you know, if you go sort of metaphoric with it, Michelangelo was a channel. He channeled the Sistine Chapel. You know, Jules Verne was a channel. He channeled his books, you know. So the thing is, we are vehicles for divine expression in many forms and in many ways. And sometimes those will take on, you know, different roles. We'll take on different roles during an entire lifetime, in which now we're doing the channeling thing, now we're doing the astrology thing, now we're doing the energy healer thing, or now we're doing the author thing. It's like trying to be comfortable with whatever is flowing now, as opposed to trying to hold on to the past or anxiously grabbing for something that isn't there yet in the future, because you're not where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, that's a great encouragement, I think, for many of us who don't like to be labeled or limited by a job description. For example, you know, this sole purpose translating as a career path, and really finding a deeper essence of being, of creativity, which can show up in many different ways, and can offer something to others on multiple levels as well.
Well, we're talking here about, you know, what is the North Node's expression? Well, with myself, North Node in Aries is somebody who starts things, but not necessarily going to be hanging around to finish it or implement it even.
Okay.
All right.
So tell us a bit more about that. One criticism of astrology is, you know, there are only 12 signs, there are so many positions. You know, are we all copies of the same thing? You know, we're also individual. How can we possibly say that, you know, North Node in Aries or whatever will be an adequate reflection of an individual journey?
I think the trick here, and is sort of the wonder of astrology, is that even two identical twins born in the same place on the same day will not have the same chart. Identical. So we're each carrying our own individual blueprint. And so that blueprint is a map. It's a roadmap. And what I find is that, I'm going to lose track of the question, the statement. But I don't think it defines us. I think it instructs. That's the best with astrology. It's not, you know, we're unique. It, you know, you mentioned part, what are we all things, you know, part of the one thing. We are that, all right? But that one thing is really into diversity, you know? It's like the all that is wants to experience what it feels like to be Elena. The all that is wants to experience what Joe wants to experience, or Jerry, or Susie. You know, and in that there is a certain harmony of being. There's a harmony of being, but the purposes and roles will be either also harmonious or diametrically opposed. You cannot foretell a person's destiny from their chart, but in Hindu astrology, that's what they did. Every time the child was born in the village, the first person you called, after the midwife was called, you called the village astrologer to cast the chart, see if the child's going to have a good marriage, marry well, have a good dowry, and all the rest of it. Very mundane concerns, but very practical. These days, in the West, we're more interested in understanding ourselves. It is this kind of obsession with self. Psychologically based, yes, we want to understand ourselves, but there are systems or methods that go way beyond astrology for really finding out who that is beyond our current understanding. And whereas indigenous cultures had more of a groupthink idea of being, and so, you know, the tribal members felt they were so intrinsically part of the tribe, their idea of being an individual was just completely alien to them. You know, I'm not important, the tribe is important, the family is important. These days, I think we're beginning to see the death of the rugged individualistic idea or notion of self, because it has become so destructive and so myopic. Just have to look around at what's going on ecologically or politically to see where our attachment to the idea of the mind, or as other spiritual teachers have said, the mind-created idea of self has gotten us into a lot of hot water. So the chart should not become another accessory to the ego.
This concludes part 1 of my conversation with spiritual mentor and astrologer Isaac George. You can find out more about Isaac at www.isaacgeorge.com. That's isaacgeorge.com. Tune in again next week to listen to the rest of our discussion and find out more about Isaac's free giveaways for listeners, including a free transit reading, which is normally worth £100. More about those offers next time. In the meantime, please send in your own stories, anything you'd like to share with us here at Soul Connections, any questions, feedback, also your prize draw entries and requests for future topics and guests. Just send an email to soulconnections@elenaangel.com. That's soulconnections@elenaangel.com. We'll be delighted to hear from you. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a wonderful day and connect again next time. This is Elena Angel and Soul Connections.
Thanks for tuning in to tonight's broadcast. We hope you enjoyed the show and look forward to you being with us for the next edition of Soul Connections, where you can always find soulful topics and inspiring guests. To find out more about Elena, her work, and how to get in touch, just go to www.elenaangel.com. From all of us to all of you, blessings from Soul Connections.